How's that working now?
Well, I was very confused there for a second.
You were confused.
Were
I
you,
thought
were you talking in the background there?
yes.
So was I. But if anybody's hearing it, if the audience is hearing a little bit it's we both talked stupid stuff beforehand. I went way off track. I did Ray J. Johnson Jr. moments there.
I
So
hate this remote thing. Well, hopefully we're on. I don't know. I was kind of
well,
waiting.
we'll find out right now. If you go over to the public chat, we'll see if people see Igor is there right now. So I guess we're
Hey, how you doing, man? What I was saying, Pete, in the background there is that based on what I'm hearing now and what was said yesterday, it looks like we may be grounded till August or September. How are we going to do the Fishing Canada series?
I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do here, to be honest with you. Maybe we'll go down to Georgia because they're talking about Georgia starting to open up everything now. Like I heard that yesterday or this morning too. Like
you know what? Maybe we'll go down to Ted Putnam's place in the U.S. and shoot down there, and they're going to be free before we are, by the sounds of it.
We can do half the season down there, and then when he opens up north, we'll go up there and have a total Teddy year. So,
yeah. Anyways, hi everybody. You kind of picked us up midstream. We were talking about what we're going to do next year for the Fishing Canada show, based on the fact that we might not be able to even do any traveling till well into August, by the sounds of it. So
that's crazy. Yeah, who knows?
No. So what are we doing today, Mr. Bowman? You got this under control?
Yeah, I got this under control. I think what we're going to do, and we've got to make a format for this, right? This is all new to us as much as it is for everybody else. So I think what we need to do on every one of these, if we do them Tuesdays and Fridays, we take the questions that were not answered from the previous post or host or whatever you call this, and then we answer those questions and then move on to a subject. So in this case, we'd have a bunch of questions from last week's show, and then we'll delve into those. We have some questions that are emailed to Fishing Canada. We'll knock into those too. And at the end of it all, I was thinking we should go to the early season pike article we did, and then we can talk a little bit about that for the 5 baits suggested by obviously me, Ray D'Angelo.
I got a bone to pick with you.
Yeah, I know you do.
Let's not get into that right now.
No, let's do that after for sure.
How about the fact that we also were supposed to name this segment, and we're going to ask folks to pitch in.
Yeah.
And maybe even do the heavy lifting and come up with a name for the segment. We've got a few ideas, but we'd like to hear from you. We have to give it a name. We have to title this thing, whatever it is.
I agree. That'd be great. It'd be nice if the audience could name it for us, Not Ted Putnam, because he'll put something, he'll slag us in some way or another for sure. So it's gonna have to be something good versus evil. Hey, Willie Machette's in there. Hey, Will, how you doing, buddy? Handlebars Fishing, Muskie Boys there. Nice.
Yeah, the Muskie Boys around. Also, I'm getting a lot of buddies of mine who heard about last week's show, and they said they couldn't find us. They couldn't get on. So if we need to make any announcements as to how people can get this podcast, then we should be doing it now, and or put it up on the screen or something. How do people connect with this show? Obviously, there's a bunch of you already there that don't need that information, but apparently there was a bunch last week that couldn't make it on. So
yeah. Now maybe Stephen, who's running the helm behind us here right now, maybe he can type something in there if need be, but they won't be on anyway. So I don't know how we do it if we have to social.
fishingcanada.com/live. That's it. That's all they need to know, right?
We're saying
I have to now come on and say,
hey,
fishingcanada.com/live.
Is that a bed behind you?
Yeah, that's where I sleep.
It's an empty bed. It's an empty bed. You're a simple man.
Studio.
All right.
Anyways, bye for now.
But we're saying fishingcanada.com/live, but we're saying it to people that are already here. That's no good to them. We have to get it to somebody that can't get on.
Well, you tell your friends, people that are listening, watching and in the chat, share it on social media, fishingcanada.com/live, share it on Facebook groups, do your thing. It's a cool experience every Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday and Friday.
A guy who's supposed to be a tech type guy, how come your image is so terrible?
Because you're seeing it, the fans don't see it. It's something different. The fans don't see what you're seeing.
Oh,
they see a lot.
Put a picture of Brad Pitt up there for the fans to see.
Exactly.
All right, let's get on with the show, shall we?
Yeah. Would you want to delve into questions from last time, Ange?
Yeah, I think we should. I think we
Yeah, I
should.
mean, we can go from, we got a list made up here, and we got, I would say let's start from the top. The one from Kathy Walters. It's a pretty basic question, but I don't think Kathy watches a whole lot because go ahead.
Or she could be from Saskatchewan and is very curious, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Kathy wants to know: Have we ever been fishing in Saskatchewan?
there it is on the screen there. Perfect. Thank you, Stephen. I love you, brother.
And to answer that, I guess over the last 30 some odd years, I would say we've been there. I'm going to go out on a limb now and say we've been there anywhere to, I don't know, 15 times, 20 times. So yes, the answer is a resounding absolutely. And not only just for what you would normally associate Saskatchewan for, Pete did a show there, a largemouth, which is pretty unusual, right?
That was awesome. Boundary Dam Reservoir, and it was near the town of Estevan. And what a great show that was. We've been to Selwyn Lake, Tobin Lake, Boundary Dam, Last Mountain Lake. I think isn't there a Wollaston Lake up there too, Ange? In
Northwest corner.
Yeah, so we've been there too.
We mentioned.
Yeah,
yeah, we've been there a bunch of times. It's an unbelievable fishing province for sure. You know, if there's a knock, if there's anything wrong with it at all, and I'm not suggesting that there is, but if there is a weak link, maybe not enough infrastructure, getting from point A to point B is sometimes very difficult in terms of aligning your means of transport. But other than that, it's an incredible fishery for sure. Absolutely.
From north to south, there's a lot of good fishing in Saskatchewan. So,
okay, next one is from Elaine Leduc. And it says, if I was looking into a fly-in fishing camp in Ontario, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, what would you recommend for someone who's maybe on a budget? Oops, sorry, I'll take back that wink, wink, nudge, nudge, but is still looking for that full experience? That's a $1 million question. You know, the budget thing is kind of interesting because from my experience, budgets are relative to the person who is establishing them. What I might think is a low budget might not be necessarily your idea of a low budget. So it's pretty difficult for us to sort of give you a general answer on that. But there are some economy trips available. There's lots of economy trips, and there's lots of premium trips. If you're looking for premium, let me throw the premiums out first. You've got Hawk Lake, obviously, that we've talked about on our programs for a while now. You've got Lodge 88, which is another great premium trip. There's probably, in my opinion, in Ontario, there's probably a dozen absolutely stellar premium trips that one could take. And then below that, there's probably several hundred economy trips, because the rest to me are all economy. If you're not at the premium level, you're all economy. And there's a ton of those. What species would you be looking for would be probably the most important question to ask. And because you didn't tell us that, it's going to be pretty hard to really pinpoint it. You're just saying you're looking for a flying-in fishing camp in Ontario. Pete, what do you got on that?
I think the normal species that on a flying camp would be walleye and pike. As a rule, like walleye is the number one in the province. Pike would be right there because it's usually in the same lake. You know what? Like Agicha's KB Cabins, they're not expensive. Great place. You bring your own food in and go with those. Timberwolf Lodge. I love those guys. Those guys are like absolutely awesome. These are on small lake. Well, KB Cabins is on Temagami or whatever the hell that name of that lake is. It's huge, but it's got a ton of walleye. But Timberwolf, it's got a great little lake. I think there's only 2 lodges on the whole lake. Very perfectly priced in that mid-level, and the fishing is outstanding. So those are a couple right there. I mean, Go Fish in Ontario is a great site. You can go in there and type in what you want, type in your budget, and you will find the lodge that you want, the species you want, everything else. Because like Ange said, we've gotten into Hasty Lake, and that's a fly-in bass lake. So as rare as that is, if that's what you want, there's a lot of different species out there.
Martin River Lodge comes to mind. I mean, there are a ton of them. Hey, listen, why don't you go to fishingcanada.com and check out the archives, because we've shot programs pretty much every significant operation in this province for sure. And you can actually see the experience first, and then make a decision based on that.
Absolutely. Next question.
Mark Burton, any tips for maintenance and cleaning fishing tackle? Well, excuse me on that one. I'll defer that one to you, Mr. Bowman.
You know what? I say maintenance on your reels. Here's a good one for you. Whenever, let's say in the fall when you're done for the year, or you don't fish a whole lot, loosen your drag right off on your reels, bait casting and spinning reels. Okay, loosen that drag off so it's not tight and bound down, because there's a washer system in there, and you do not want to compress those washers if they don't need to be. Your drag will work a lot better. So you loosen that drag right off, or 3/4 of the way off. I think that's a great tip that we always do. Like, I mean, if we're going to put these rods, musky rods, we go for once or twice. For us, we don't do a lot, so once or twice in a season, we'll turn the reels right off again, like the drags. You don't want to really, nowadays, the bait casters and spinning reels, you really don't want to take them apart too much, because there's so many intricate parts inside. If you do, just take the caps off and put a little bit of reel oil in there. Now go and buy some Ardent reel oil, or a company like that. They make great products, and you can just dip a dab of oil, and you don't really need to grease a whole lot in there anymore nowadays. I mean, ultimately you will, but then you should probably send it in for servicing. And keep them clean. You know what? If you want to clean grime off, we use 5-part water, 1 part vinegar, something like that, on a rag. Clean stuff off with that. And that's basically it. If you keep your stuff clean and a little bit oiled, loosen that drag off. That's basically all we do.
I discovered something last year that is pretty phenomenal. It's not really maintenance, it's more preventative, because I don't know what you're like at the end of the year. The last thing I want to do is start going through all the tackle boxes and dumping them out and cleaning everything off like we should be, especially to dry things out. So generally what happens with me, I open up my tackle box in the spring, and there's a lot of rust in there. I stumbled into this great product actually 2 years ago. I found it in Europe, of all places, by a company that's American called Woodstream. And they had this new product out called, I think it's, Pete, help me on this one. Is it Z-Rust?
I think so. I think I have one sitting here. Hang on. I'll go grab one.
So there's a product called Z-Rust, and it's this blue plastic-looking stuff, and it comes in different shapes and sizes. And you put it in your tackle boxes. They even have you've got one right there. Yeah, it's Z-Rust, it's called. This stuff is nothing short of a miracle. So you put that in your tackle box, you tape it onto the inside lid of your tackle box, and it dries up all the moisture. And you come back in the spring and open your boxes, and there's no rust. Like, it's a miracle.
The thing of beauty, for sure.
It is great. And they also have the little dividers that you can divide your actual tackle box with, little plastic inserts. You take out the clear ones that come with the box, and you put these blue ones in. And I'm telling you, it's the best preventative, pre-maintenance product that you can get.
And they also make a little block too. They make a little smaller one that can go in a compartment of this box instead of the big, the one I just showed you. So really good, really great idea, and it works. Pretty cool.
Sean Richard wants to know. He says, I have a question for you guys. When are you going to resurrect Barclays, the greatest fishing store on earth?
That's awesome.
I have some fond memories of that baby, I'll tell you. But that one is long gone. That was a retail store. For those of you who aren't aware of it, we had a retail store for about 25 years, and this was pre everything. Walmart was not in Canada. Canadian Tire wasn't really in the fishing game. And there was a handful of retailers that were taking fishing seriously, and Barclays was one of them. It was the first of the superstores for the outdoors, so it was pretty cool. Met a lot of people there. Have a lot of fond memories, like I say, but I'm kind of glad we're not in that game anymore. It was time to get out for sure. But thanks for bringing that up and giving us some great memories.
You've got on the right side, if everybody's looking at the comments, one guy adds minute rice to his tackle, moisture packs, silica gel, So we're getting lots of good advice over there too. That rice, actually, it's a good idea. If you take electronic devices and put it in the dry rice, it'll take the moisture out. So I've never tried it in my tackle box, but it's a good idea.
Yeah, it works and everything else. No reason it wouldn't work, right?
Yep. Yeah. Next question, Stephen.
Neil Curtis. If you were fishing a large body of water, Oak Lake, Manitoba, that is only 7 to 8 feet deep max, with sandy, featureless bottom, what would be your go-to tactics and why? The lake has tons of walleye and football-sized perch and pike. There you go.
You want me to take a shot at that?
Woo!
What's that?
7 feet.
That's a bull. You know what that reminds me of, Ange? The portion of Max Hamish Lake that we fish, the big sandy point. No weeds whatsoever, all sand. Now, it goes out deeper than that in the deep areas. But that said, if you compare his lake to that, what a really good tactic that Ange and Nick came up with the first trip out there was long line trolling floating minnow baits. So it's only 7 feet of water. That's almost exactly what we're fishing.
Yeah,
long line trolling, like a floating minnow bait that doesn't get down very deep, obviously, but nice slow pace with that 2 horsepower Merc, and it worked really well, right?
Oh, and I think the key there, as most of you know, and as Pete knows, I'm big on vertical fishing, right? Give me a drop shot rig and a shad shaped worm and put me in the corner and I'll be there for weeks, come back and I'm still there. But for the most part, it's my first go-to bait that I'll use on just about any lake for any species of fish. Well, in this particular situation, on this lake that Pete just mentioned, I did that for about 2 hours and had very limited success. And then we started just casting out these little, about 4-inch stick baits and stuff, throwing them out, minnow baits, trying to figure out what was going on. And at one point, inadvertently, I wanted to move to a different location, and I put the boat in gear, and we weren't moving for 2 seconds, and we caught a fish. And so it started developing into a pattern, and all of a sudden, we just found out that every time we stopped, there was no action. As soon as you're in forward motion, you're getting fish. And that key there, I think, was clear, shallow, featureless bottom water. And it sounds like that's what you've got. So my answer to you would be long line trolling, small baits, floating baits, but yeah, I think you'll find that to be very successful. The vertical presentation is great, but when you've got crystal clear water and only 7-8 feet below the boat, chances are pretty good that you're going to spook most of the fish in close proximity. So that's where that long distance trolling comes in.
Now I'm going to give you a couple more that I've done on a few lakes, very few, even one on Max Hamish. One is taking a 5-inch 4 or 5-inch swim bait. Or you can use a curly-tailed grub or something like that, but on a jig head and long bombing casts away out there. Even if I did this when Andrew was trolling the minnow bait, I'd quarter the boat. I'd cast it way out there, let it drop down and pop into the sand. So you can go with like a 1/2 ounce head, let it hit the sand, and then just work it back like a jig. Even though it's a swim bait, it's one of the rare times I run a swim bait like a jig, but I lift it up and let it puff back into the sand. Up, let it puff back into the sand. And that can really trigger walleyes and pike too, depending on what you want to get. But if you want to get walleyes, do that. Or if it's 7 or 8 feet, as you say, take a 10-foot deep diving crankbait. So a walleye shape or even a bass style crankbait. And this is for casting mostly. Cast it out again, long bomb cast, and rip it down as hard as you can, reel it as fast as you can to dig into the sand. And then slow it down. And when that thing is going along like this and digging into the sand every now and then, it leaves up a puff of dirt, puff of sand and all that. And that can catch a lot of walleye too, depending on the activity level of the fish. So those are 2 tactics you might want to try. Swim baits with a jig head and 10-foot or a deeper crankbait than the bottom and dig it in there.
Sounds good. Of course, we've got all kinds of different things too. If you go to fishingcanada.com and go on to our Steven, what's our segment with that? We have a button there on the site that people can go in and how-tos, right? We have all kinds of how. You can get a lot more in-depth information there. So that's Fishing Canada.
Our YouTube channel too. We get lots of stuff on there too. So
yeah. Mark Camp wants to know: do I have to register a canoe with a trolling motor and a 5 horsepower outboard? And the answer is no. You do not have to register a canoe in this country, as far as I know. And I was at one point a very significant retailer of canoes, and back then, no, you didn't have to. So unless
the rule of thumb as well, I think, get me wrong, maybe I'm wrong on this one, is that anything 10 horsepower or up as boat wise needs to be registered. That's why they make 9.9s. That's why that number 9.9 came in, so you don't have to register that little 14-footer with a 9.9 on it. So a 5 horsepower would be well under that, and the canoe thing. So I don't think you'd have to register it now.
Are you sure about that?
There used to be that. The 9.9, that's why they made that.
Okay, but a boat is not registered as a 9.9. Like when you go register a boat, the horsepower doesn't enter into it.
I believe it. I think
I buy a boat without a motor on it.
Right.
I can buy a 20-foot boat with no motor on it.
And you can, if you've got a 20-foot bass boat and you start paddling around, you don't have to register it. I want to see you paddle that boat, pal.
No, I'm serious. I don't know. You know what? We're probably the wrong people to ask, because what happens with us, our equipment comes in and somebody else does all the registering, and they just point us in the right direction, and we go get on the boat and off we go. So sorry about that one. But
it's a good one. Maybe we'll look into it, or somebody can say it in the comments if somebody knows the legalities of it.
By the way, all of these other questions that you're asking now, that we see them up on the listing here, we'll get at them either later or for next week's show. It's not like we're ignoring you, because there's a lot of great questions there, but we do have to adhere to this list first.
Yeah.
So that you know. Whatever happened to the mouse lure?
I'm gonna let you take it.
Steve McAllister, thank you for that one, Steve. Appreciate it. We've only answered that one about 1 million times over the last 10 or so years.
Yeah, okay.
It's taken so many different turns and twists, and right now at this very moment it's sitting in limbo. Obviously, the pandemic kind of put a stop to anything that was coming along in terms of development. We will resurrect it when the time is appropriate. Just so that we have it perfectly clear, the most difficult part of that bait was, first of all, the cupping of the ears was a real difficult thing to get a patent for, and we worked in getting that. But that was not the biggest problem. The biggest problem was the fur. We used real fur on that bait, and it had to be a hand process, cutting the fur and adhering it to the body of the bait. It could not be automated. Several companies tried in the Orient to do it, and everything that came back we rejected. We just could not get the quality levels through an automated process of putting on this real fur. If it was artificial fur, it was fine, but the problem with artificial fur is it didn't fish very well. So we didn't want to sacrifice the fishability of the bait, because the key to this bait is that it truly is magic. It catches fish. Bottom line, there's very few baits. I've never fished a topwater bait in my life, and I am big on topwater fishing. I've never fished a topwater bait in my life like this thing. But we couldn't get it manufactured to work properly. We couldn't get it manufactured with natural fur and still have the quality control and the ability to produce mass quantities at an affordable price. We could if it was going to be a $25 or $35 or even a $40 lure. But our dream, our vision of this bait when we first put it together was to come up with a lure that we could, have everybody buy, a $10, a $12 lure that everybody could afford. And so we really stuck to our principles, and that's why it's not on the market yet. Obviously, we're not in the lure production business, but one day I wouldn't count it out. It's not a dead issue yet. So thanks for that.
So we're obviously thinking of the consumer on that one, and that, like Ann said, if we can get that made for $10, that'd be great. If it was $10, probably not going to have even $12. But the way everybody has been quoting us, it's like, oh God, it's going to be a $20 plus lure at least. So we want to get it down a lot more than that, so everybody, as Ann said, can afford it. So I'm looking at this list, Ann, and there's a lot of people that are with me on the 10 horsepower thing over there. All pleasure crafts powered by an engine of 10 horsepower or more are required by to have a pleasure craft license by Transport Canada. There's a bunch of them saying that. You guys pretty much nailed it. 10 horse on a boat needs registration. So
I'll take their word for it. I believe you. I believe each and every one of you, because I don't know the answer. Now I do. Thank you. Thank you. Here's one that's kind of interesting. Do Great Lakes anglers, so Great Lakes anglers, use marabou jigs or plastic worms for tributary when they're steelhead fishing? Both methods were done in BC, and being back home now doing this semi-retirement gig has me curious about a few things. And that's from Donald Stokes. I know Don. How you doing?
Still, he's an happy boy.
Yeah, we met Stokes out west one time. You remember?
That's right.
River. Yeah,
that's right.
So I find this question fascinating because I'll mention his name. A good friend of mine. I haven't seen him in 100 years. Randy Jennings is his name, and he's a river rat. He is one of the I would say original steelhead anglers that ran all of these rivers on the north shore of Lake Ontario, and knew every fish by first name. He taught me a little thing about marabou jigs. You know, at a time when roe or single eggs, that was the big thing. I mean, roe bags were even sort of falling out of style, if you will. Single eggs were really big, and I remember Randy one time tying on this little white marabou jig. He's probably, if he's listening to this, he's probably screaming right now, "Don't tell him!" But white marabou jigs, when everybody else is using roe, is absolutely dynamite. And no, Don, very few people are using them. So marabou's a great bait, and not only for steelhead rivers. I think just about any type of fishing, marabou is a great product.
And plastic, little plastic worms, Donnie, for sure. I don't know if people can see that right there.
Oh, yeah.
Pink plastic worms. A lot of guys, a lot of people are throwing that on the rivers, especially after a couple weeks into the season. When roe is starting to be seen by every trout in there, then they're looking for something different, right? So they use a tiny little, can you see that hook? Look at the size of that hook. Tiny little hook like that with that bait. Pink seems to be the color for that. So they do use that here. They also use beads, plastic beads, are very popular. Looks like a single egg. And a lot of guys use flies under a float with spinning gear or float reels. And so whatever's done out west is probably being done out here too, or in here too. So
a lot of the things from out west, you know, we started fishing out in BC in the mid '80s for salmon, and there were a lot of things that the BC folks were using that we'd never seen in the Great Lakes, and vice versa. We were fishing for salmon in the Great Lakes and steelhead in the Great Lakes, you know, at the same time with totally different products. So it was a great time in the fishing community, a great time of cross-pollination of different techniques, presentations, and in fact baits. And you know, it turns out that fish are fish no matter where they are, and they do what fish do. And so a lot of these baits work in various areas. So.
The Canadian Rod Father says marabou is badass on local tribs. There you go.
There you go. There you go. Perfect.
With a name like the Rod Father, I gotta believe him.
You're not going to argue with that one.
Yeah, sure.
Billy Hatfield from
Billy.
Scotia. How you doing, Billy? Hopefully you're on.
Billy won the B1. He's a B1 boy, that guy.
Yeah, he wants to know when we're going to go lobster fishing with him.
Oh my God, Billy! You name the time as soon as possible, ASAP, buddy. You name it, we're there. Oh, that'd be fun, eh?
How many times? Who's this? Cody Goodchild wants to know how many times have you hooked yourselves?
Oh boy!
In all of the years that you have been fishing.
Oh my God!
before you say anything, I don't mind. I'll come out and say that I have probably got more puncture wounds on this old body of mine than anybody in the business. However, I will also don't laugh. What are you laughing about?
I can't help myself because I've experienced trips with you in the past, especially. Go ahead.
All right, but I do want to say one thing, and you will back me up on this. It has been a long time since
Oh yeah, we absolutely. Yeah,
piercing my body.
absolutely.
For a while there, I was on a run for about 3-4 years. Oh my God. Like I pierced every part of my body with hooks. Deadly, deadly.
So, do you remember any instances in particular? Do you remember?
Okay, I'll
Story with it?
give you two. I'll give you two that are just they're burned into my psyche. One of them is in Manitoba. I want to call it White Rock Lake. I could no, it started with a Burton Lake, I think it's called. We were smallmouth bass fishing, and I was throwing a popper, and the action was insane. Like every you anticipated a 5-pound smallmouth bass on every single cast with a popper. And so this was now going on for about 45 minutes an hour. And now like you're before the popper even hits the water, you're already envisioning you setting the hook on a 4 to 5 pound fish. And so I was getting into this rhythm. It was almost mechanical in that I was casting and it would just hit, and I'd already set the hook because I knew there was going to be a fish on it. Anyways, at this one point, I threw it out, and as I remember vividly, as I'm casting to this piece of wood, I'm saying to myself, this is going to be the biggest strike of the day. And as I'm throwing it, I'm setting the hook. And in fact, this big boil came up, but I just anticipated it way too soon, pulled the popper back towards me. As it's coming towards me, I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is going to hurt. This is coming right at me. And somehow I deflected it down, and it lodged itself. Two of the treble hooks, 2 points of treble hook, lodged themselves into my shin. Into my shin. That had been the first time I'd ever done that one. Into the bone, your shin bone, with 2 hooks.
Nice.
I remember that one.
I don't think there was a hospital or anything quite close to there. I think we were in quite a way in the city, right? I think
we were in the middle of nowhere, and the other one was on the Red River in Manitoba again.
I remember that one.
The Red River, where I just completely sliced my thumb. Catfishing, I believe it was.
I remember that one. Yeah, that was catfishing in the Red.
That one we had to go to the hospital.
Yep, you had to go to the hospital on that one.
We went out to the hospital, and then on that one, we came back and finished the show because we hadn't finished it. We had came back and finished the show with my thumb all taped up. And what I remember about that one was really cool was that a couple of years later, when that episode was airing, we had one of our fans wrote in, and none of us had even paid attention to it. We had a fan wrote in and said, hey, I have a question. I just finished watching Red River Cats with Angelo, and I noticed something kind of weird, and it's been bothering me for a while, so I thought I'd write in and ask you. And it was, how come he started the show? No, it was the opposite, because as it turned out, we shot it out of sequence. He said, how come Angelo started the show with a big wad of tape on his thumb, and then it wasn't there a couple of casts later? So he noticed it.
It was a fast healer. That's what you told him. Well, Angela's a real fast healer. Don't you worry about that. I'll tell you, my very first instance of hooking myself, I was on Lake Ontario shoreline around Port Hope, I think it was. And for some reason, we were throwing spinners. Me and my buddy had spinning gear. And I had a little spinner on, but I had a split shot. Like, where's the camera? Like a split shot, 1.5 feet ahead of the spinner. And we were doing a casting contest, typical young guys, distance. And I, we had these light baits. Want to see who was good with the light stuff. So I remember distinctly, it was into the wind or some weird situation where I wound up. I mean, I was back with this spinning rod, right ready to go, and I flinged it out as hard as I could, and I remember seeing the split shot go like this and stop, and I don't even know what happened because it was so quick like that. And I said, "What the hell happened?" My buddy looks, and the spinner's right in the back of my head. I had put it right back in the noggin like that. And we did that. We did that line through the hook technique to pop it out, and sure as hell, he popped that out just like nothing. That was my first time. And you'll remember this one when we were in Mexico largemouth fishing.
Oh yeah.
And I took it right through there. Where's the camera? Right through. I mean, right through.
Yeah.
Luckily, so we got to cut that off. We got to cut the hook off, and I pulled it right back out. And then within less than a half an hour later, I stuck another one right into the thumb. These were fish that were on crankbait, so they flash around and all that stuff. And luckily, the one on the thumb, I said, "Ange, I did it again." And Ange goes, "No." And we were even afraid to look at it, but luckily, the hook was about 90% to the barb, but it hit the bone, and it didn't go all the way through. So that was my second time. It was 2 in a day. And then, Stephen, have you got that other image? Have you got that image? That one right there on our site right now. That I did last year. And that was a fish that threw my crankbait at the side of the boat. So the fish was still in the water fighting. It threw it, and I kind of put my hand up to kind of get out of the way or protect myself or whatever, and thump right into the hand that sucker went. So that was my my most recent one right there. So so we get hooked. Trust me, we get hooks in us every now and then. Yeah.
Careless, right? That's the amazing part about it. It's not like we're careless. We're constantly. If you were on a boat with us, I think the biggest chatter that you hear all day is we constantly tell each other to be careful when we're handling fish, you know, with a crankbait or something that's got a couple of exposed treble hooks. We're constantly trying to talk the other guy, you know, through a nice safe release. And I always cringe when we're at that moment of putting a hand into a fishing mouth that's got a crankbait hanging off the side of it.
Yeah, if you notice that what Ange was talking about earlier about the top water bait he was using, and I'm talking about crankbaits. I mean, they're both treble hook baits. They both have 2 treble hooks on them. That makes them real dangerous. I mean, minnow baits, any bait with 2 or 3 trebles on it, you got to be careful with. And it's inevitable. You're going to get hooked. You can't help yourself, right? But you just got to be as careful as you can. So those are stories. Those are good.
There's a bunch of you sharing stories as well with each other. I see about your days of getting hooked. So that's great. We'll have a look at them as well.
What we got now?
What do we got?
What or who got you into fishing?
What or who got you into fishing? For me, it all started after watching Red Fisher episodes. Wow.
That's awesome.
Wow. Well, I know for me personally, I don't recall who. I can honestly say that it was not my father, although he played a very important role in my fishing career a little later on. But I remember when I was like, I'm going to say 5, 6, 7 years old. I mean, back then, different times, and I basically lived on a creek. Our house was I'm going to say 2 blocks from the Oshawa Creek, and so my whole upbringing was based around in and around that area, whether it was the woods, the adjacent woods, or the creek itself. I spent my whole youth mucking around and chasing fish. And back then, I don't even know what they were. I'm assuming they were probably carp, but we had these great big fish that were in the Oshawa Creek all over the place. And I remember as a kid, we'd go down there and just chase them around and whack them with sticks and that kind. And that's where my fascination of fishing started. And then obviously from there, I got into discovering it was more fun trying to catch them on a hook and a line. But that's kind of where it started. And it just happened because I was given the opportunity. The circumstances were there for me to immerse myself into that sort of outdoors thing, which is a real travesty today because that's just not happening. It's just not happening. Back then, it was kind of normal. If you lived anywhere within walking distance of a waterway, that's where you hung out as kids. Why wouldn't you? And today, it's just not not happening. As far as who was instrumental in getting me to where I am in my career today, I keep telling the story because I think it's really cool. So back, I just told you I was hanging around the Osher Creek most of my life, and it to the point that the problem is schooling got in the way of that enjoyment far too often. And so a lot of times I would take off from school and hang out at the creek and do some fishing and stuff. So they knew pretty much where to find me when I wasn't in school. And back then we had nuns. They were running the Catholic school system. And by the way, I hope there's no nuns out there watching this, but man, oh man, they are tough. They're tough people. Ruthless, tough, nasty is the only way I can describe it. But anyways, I had this nun called Sister Mary Roselia and Sister Mary Sister Thomas Aquinas. They were the principal and vice principal at Holy Cross School. And they, of course, when I get brought back to the school, they would give me the finger wagging and the strap, because that's what they did back then, right? And I remember so distinctly Sister Mary Roselia one time saying, Viola, how many times do I have to tell you, you're never going to make a living from going fishing. So stay in school. That was her and I always say that's what it must have inspired me subconsciously to do what I do for a living.
Did she call you Viola? Did they call you by your last name?
They all did. Back then, they all called you by your last name.
That's
the nuns called you by your last name, not your first name.
That is awesome. Contrary to Anne's, I got in by my dad. My dad grew up hunting and fishing his whole life. They lived way up in northern Ontario, a little town called Sleeman, Ontario, and they were poor, believe it or not, back in then. Probably a lot of people were. So they used to live off the land. They used to do a lot of hunting to feed themselves, fishing and all that kind of stuff. They had a fur farm, believe it or not. So they raised animals to sell the fur. So his dad, I think my grandfather he was a surveyor or something like that, but he also was a great hunter and a great fisherman up there. They had to feed he had 110 foxes at one time, silver foxes that they had to feed every day. So they had to, get suckers and fish like that. They didn't have to feed these fish. So my dad, he grew up, I got some stories, man. I'll tell you, he's got some stories. I could blow your minds. Like they have pet deer when they were growing up that used to walk them to school every day and then wait for them to get out of school and then walk home with them. He had 2 pet bear cubs for pets, a black bear and a brown bear. The black was real timid. The brown bear was apparently quite the character, and my dad taught it out of a box, and that got him into trouble. Got the bear sent away, actually. So stories like that. But anyways, they had fishing in their life, and that my dad. I mean, from the time I was born, obviously, he fished with his buddies, and then as soon as I showed, interest in fishing, that was it. Him and I it was game on. And to this day, I mean, I just dropped him off some fishing magazines. He's 91 years old. Right now, and he still loves fishing, but that's how I got into it, and I'm glad my dad was a fishing guy because that instilled into me big time. So, if that takes case,
it's great to get them back every once in a while. They float through your
oh
head.
my God, those are great, because we're talking old school memories, aren't we?
Here's one that's really a great question. Ken Randall wants to know, when do you choose to use a bait casting outfit versus a spinning outfit? And that's a great question. And we'll probably, between Pete and I, will probably give you 2 totally different answers, because I really do believe it's subjective, meaning that we're not machines, right? We all do things slightly different. And bait casting and spinning is really personal as far as I'm concerned. I love bait casting. I would use bait casting if I could. I'd use it 90% of the times that I pick up a rod and reel. It would be a bait casting rod and reel. However, I said I would if I could. However, that's not going to happen, because a lot of the times, although you can do things like vertically jig with a bait caster, you can drop shot with a bait caster, you can light line with a bait caster, you can skip a worm under a dock with a bait caster, but it's not the ideal way to do it. a spinning is a much more effective tool, spinning rod and reel, much more effective tool to use under those conditions. So some of us, like myself, we sometimes catch ourselves. I catch myself saying, okay, why are you picking up? Why are you putting 8-pound test line on this bait caster? You know that it would be much better to use a spinning in this case. But I just love using bait casters, so sometimes I'll use it when I shouldn't. But ideally, light line is the perfect spinning is a perfect tool to use. Heavier lines, bait casting is the perfect tool to use. If you want to take that one step further, for me, my thinking is light line, vertical presentation, spinning, light line, horizontal presentation, bait cast. Heavy line for either vertical or horizontal, I would go to bait cast. So that's me. Peter?
Yeah, I think you've pretty well summed that up perfectly. I'll add to it for some numbers here, just to give people the kind of my rule of thumb. So I like, if I'm running 8-pound test or lighter, it's on baitcaster or on spinning. I don't use it on baitcaster at all. I like that. That's for monofilament and for fluorocarbon. For braid, now it's nice and thin, I would say 15, maybe 20 pound. I mean, I'll run sometimes 20 pound on spinning, but usually 15 or lower on spinning. Then that 10-pound range of any line can be done on either one. 10 pound on spinning, you're starting to get a little bit heavier, but you still do it no problem. And 10-pound braid can go on spinning very well. I wouldn't use it on bait casting at all. But then when you start with the bait casting, I'd say 12-pound and up for mono and fluorocarbon. And then let's say over 20 pounds, so 30-pound and up for braid on baitcaster. That's the way I kind of look at it, those numbers like that. So that light 8 and under, it's kind of a system that I've just come up with. And I mean, I'll look at one specific of it. When I said between 15 and maybe 20-pound braid on spinning, I'm talking about a normal size, 1,000 to 2,500 size spinning reel, nothing bigger than that. So when you go to 30-pound on a reel like that, 30-pound braid, it starts to get a little thick. It's not as workable, let's say. So, and it's all trial and error, but those are the numbers that basically I use for that. So, but Ange is right. The heavy baitcaster and light is spinning, basically.
And the other main thing there is the vertical versus horizontal presentations. I just find, although as I said before, and I've done it, you can certainly jig with baitcaster. Right? You can do vertical jigging with baitcaster just as well. But spinning really is designed for that. So, but once again, it's a personal thing, and depending on your comfort level with each one of those outfits.
Absolutely.
Dave wants to know.
Oh, that's a good one.
This is a pretty broad question. Do you have any tips for bass, pike, and walleye on Lake Temagami?
Nice. Clean water. Very, very clean water. So you got to keep that right off the bat into consideration, right? So we did a show years ago. Ange did a show with Roy Arms on Temagami years ago.
Yeah.
And you guys targeted smallmouth, I think, right? And you guys drop shotted really light line, some small plastics on that one, I believe, right?
Yeah, there are some areas of that lake that aren't clear.
Right.
I'm thinking the south.
I'm going to find it for us. I'm going to find it right now. You keep talking. I'm going to look it up. I know what you're talking about.
Southeast quadrant of Temagami. It's almost like a different lake, but it is all part of Temagami. Temagami is massive, by the way. But from midpoint to the far northern reaches of the lake, Pete's right. It's like tap water. It's deep and crystal clear. But you get down in the southern parts, and especially over to the east, you can get some off-colored water. And I see that there's a question being asked today about a preferential between stained water and clear water. What do you prefer? And in a perfect world, I always like to have some sort of color, whether it's tea, stain, or just something other than crystal clear water. I'm not a big fan unless it's early in the year and you're fishing some of those big mid-lake shoals like you'd have, say, on a Lake Simcoe, for example, where a shoal will top out at 10, 12 feet. And with crystal clear water, you can see the entire structure. And it really gives you an opportunity to not have to visualize what that structure looks like. You can actually see it for real. And that's what I like about that. But a little bit of color, a little bit of stain in the water for me goes a long way. So we'll often, if given the option, we'll run around looking for something that's got a little bit of color. Not completely, colored, but just enough to break the light a little bit.
That lake, Angela, that lake is called Cross Lake. Remember?
That's it. Cross Lake.
Cross Lake.
Do you know what I remember about that? We shot with Roland on that one.
No, it was Roy Arm.
Well, later on, but Roland.
Yeah.
That was the famous. Do you remember what happened there? I won't tell folks on the air. You remember, Pete? I've told you the story with Roland a million times.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's Cross Lake. So Cross Lake is like a little lake off the south end of Temagami. So you can kind of work your way in through a creek, and then you get into a whole new little lake. And it's a cool little body of water. And like Ann says, very different clarity than the main Lake Temagami. So remember, it's just if you're going to hit Temagami, I mean, Cross Lake is an option too, but Temagami, just remember, it's in that clear water. You got to go light line on your smallmouth. That's 6, maybe 8 pound test, but 6 is probably a better number. Fluorocarbon's better, or light braid with a fluorocarbon leader. And if you're going to fish for walleye, I'd highly recommend low light periods, morning, really early in the morning, evening, and even after dark. So, that again gives you the advantage. And those clear waters, a lot of time the walleye won't feed until it's dark or low light. So keep that kind of stuff in mind. And then gives you a good start anyway.
The other thing I remember about that lake was that's where I first discovered, and that's because of the clarity of that body of water. That's where I first discovered that topwater baits aren't just meant for shallow water fishing.
Oh yeah, that's
and the episode on that lake, the entire episode was shot in 40 plus feet of water, and all we used was topwater baits.
I believe that episode is on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, if I'm not mistaken.
Do you remember what it was called?
No, maybe Stephen can dig it up for us. It's a Roland Martin one, Stephen Ange and Roland Martin. I don't think it's hard to find, but we'll look it up as we're talking here. But I think it's on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. And it's an
oldie, but what a great experience that was for me personally. That's when I first, like I said, discovered that, hey, topwater baits aren't just shallow water baits. They work in deep, and we were calling these fish up from 40, 45 feet. It was fantastic. So, but that's only because of the water clarity. Obviously, if you've got any stain to water at all, that very seldom is that going to work. But there, it's great.
Yeah, and it also depends on the forage base of a lake. Another one we mentioned earlier, Hasty Lake for bass. It's got a Cisco base in it. And out in that 30 foot of water, you are constantly seeing smallmouth busting the surface, smashing through these Ciscos that are coming up on close to it, because they're above the smallmouth. So they're there, and the smallies are down here. They're constantly coming right up to the surface from 30 feet of water, smashing these. So that's why if you can get on a top water bite, it works good. But it just shows you that these fish are not afraid to come from 30 up to 0 and then back down again.
Our good friend Jim Grayson has a cottage on that lake, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Doesn't fish much, but we got to get him out more,
Yeah, no kidding. Speaking of old episodes, Paul Madison wants to know, or he says, this afternoon I enjoyed your Walleye on the Rocks, episode 422 show. Could you tell me the type and size of jerkbaits and colors that you guys were ripping them up with?
That one, I remember that one. That was we were up at Pasha Lake Cabins, I think, on that trip, and we were actually, you know what? I got one right here. Yeah,
are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. If that's the one, right there, that's the killer.
That's the bait. Was it Pasha Lake?
And that color right there too. So, and we were all set to go with the usual jig and minnow, jig and live bait, but then these fish got up we found these fish real shallow on a rocky point. And
Ottoman Lake.
What's that?
Ottoman Lake or Otter Lake.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly. And these fish were up shallow, and they were mixed in with pike. But there were some nice walleye in there. I'm talking about some big walleye sitting in that on that point. The point came up, really shallow flat, and then it went out to deep water at that. And when they were up on that shallow stuff, we thought, okay, the jigs aren't working because we're snagging in the rocks all the time. So we got to get something that stays above the rock, but something that's good and active. And we started throwing these jerk baits. And the X-Rap was one. I think the other one was a husky jerk, I think. And man, did we start clocking walleye with those things there. And that was that color I showed you, that orange, bright orange, and something really bright and flashy. Pop it really hard. Braided line on that, popping it really hard. I don't think we ran leaders. We might have had leaders on them. I'm not sure because we were just after walleye. There was pike there. But we really went after that aggressive bite on those walleye, and they were right up on the rocks. And I'm talking, some of them were 2 and 3 feet deep of water, and these were 5 and 6 pound walleye. It was mayhem. It was a lot of fun. And then later that day, those fish actually moved off. Now I don't know if we moved them off because we caught so many, because it was crazy, and it was a very small spot. Or they just moved with the progression of the day. But then afterwards, we had to go fish off the break, and then the jig and minnow started to work a little better. But up until then, that jerkbait, those X-Raps and huskies were killing it, and just pop it and pause, pop it and pause, and just really get that aggressive bite going. Because walleye, I'm going to tell you something. People think that walleye are lethargic, and for the most part, they are a lethargic fish. But I'll tell you what, they're one of the most aggressive biters and hitters in the whole lake. Like they'll outdo a pike if there's side-by-side action and the walleye wants a bait, he'll outdo a pike. He's faster and he's nasty. So keep that in mind.
Do you remember where we first discovered that presentation? By the way, throwing jerk baits up on top, like 6 inches of water on boulders.
Wasn't that away from Manitoba somewhere? Or?
That's it. That's it. It was with oh God, Sandy Beardy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
We flew into that remote little lake.
Yeah.
And we got onto that clump of rocks in the middle of that water, and it was like insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was so shallow, like 3 feet of water, right? You can see the rocks. You can see all the rocks. You thought you were going to snag up every time.
It was nuts. So
yeah. So.
By the way, I just want to acknowledge we just got a really nice message there from Colin McEwen, who's on there. For those of you with us today, the new fly fisher. We haven't talked about fly fishing here because, as you know, Pete and I would probably strangle ourselves if we ever tried doing any of that fly fishing. It's a fantastic way to fish. If you ever want to find out about fly fishing, or better yet, if you ever want to expose yourself to it and see if it might be for you, the new fly fisher is an incredible production that you have to absolutely check out. It's outstanding. And Colin just piped in, said, thanks for the many years of fantastic production. And it's reciprocal, Colin. Thank you. Thank you very much. We spent some time with Colin at Hawk Lake Lodge a couple of years ago. That was fun. We run into each other on the road. It's pretty cool. The TV guys, it's usually a total shock to everybody when it happens. But yeah.
It's usually good, dude. It's not like everybody. It's not like a war out there between us either. You know what I mean? No, we're all pretty good with each other. So,
so one more question from here, and then we'll move on. The last question we're going to answer from last week's show is Nathan Spears wants to know. He was just wondering what model of Princecraft boat do we run? And
do y'all run like that? Do y'all run?
y'all run. Also, what trolling motor are you running with, and how do you keep from draining your battery life on it? Now, this is cool. I'm glad you asked. So first of all, the boat that we have been running for about 4 years now, we actually built. We started with a Princecraft hull, and it was an Expedition 200, and it was the first year of the Expedition series Princecraft put out. The fall prior to them releasing that boat, we had an opportunity to fish out of one. And Pete and I both absolutely fell in love with the hull. I mean, the hull was just a monster. 20-foot boat that was nimble and light on its toes, just like a little 12-foot boat, but had the size and girth and weight to be able to manage really, really rough water. And so we thought, man, if we can take this hull and build it into the ultimate boat that we've always wanted, we'd have it'd be the best. So we did. The following year, we got a bare hull from Princecraft, and we commissioned a metal worker, a guy who does aluminum fabrication for motorcycles and that kind of thing, a buddy of mine. And we asked him if he could help us build this new boat, and we did. And it's been, in our family ever since. And it's probably the most important and valuable tool that we have. It's an incredible, incredible boat. And if you haven't seen it, the last 3 or 4 years of production, Fishing Canada production, has featured that boat. In fact, we even did an episode on building it, which was very cool. I think it was called The Ultimate Fishing Machine.
Yep.
And that's available on the archives as well. And it was great, but it gave us an opportunity to really spread our wings. We got an opportunity to experiment. We're not boat builders, but we know what we like, and we know through the years what works. So it gave us an opportunity to really dwell into this whole other world. And it was very cool. And we got into not just boat design, but we got into all kinds of new little pieces of technology that we were able to build into the boat. And one of the things we got into was lithium batteries. And the reason I bring that up, because you're asking us, how do you not drain? How do you keep your trolling motor from not draining the battery of your life? Well, in our case, we just put more battery in. We put 3 36-volt batteries, lithium pros, and we're able to do that because the lithiums weigh less than a quarter, actually 20% of its equivalent conventional lead acid batteries.
And that's not affordable. That is not affordable for the average person. Like, there's not one person watching this thing that would put 3 36-volt lithiums in their boats. Let's be honest here, right? How much would that be in retail value?
American, about $13,000.
Yeah, so there's not very many that would put that many batteries in their boat. Okay, let's be honest.
But you got to admit,
that's great. And the trolling motor we use is an XI5 motor guide. There's just, by the way, on that one. It's still got the shaft length that we need for that boat, because the front end of that boat is really high, so we need that 60-inch shaft on that. And you're asking about the battery drain, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things we do is we put our Garmins to sleep now all the time. So when we're fishing for an extended amount of time, push your power button on your Garmin, and then you can see it says sleep mode, or I think that's what it says, sleep mode. And by doing that, it shuts down all the inner workings of each fish finder. So if you're working up front, we got 2 in our dash and 1 on the front. We'll turn the 2 on sleep in the dash, and then start the motor back up and then turn it back on afterwards. And that makes a big difference on saving battery too. Now, that's not in the deep cycle side of battery, but it is a great tip to help you not wear down your cranking batteries. That's for sure. So that's a pretty good little tip there.
Doug's asking, is that FNC1? Absolutely, that's FNC1. That's what we call her. The other thing about trolling motors that Pete just mentioned, and this is really critical, and I don't think most people spend enough time on this part. Your distance from the battery to the trolling motor is very important. Obviously, the closer you can get it, the better. The problem with putting your battery up front, though, depending on the configuration and the size of your boat, sometimes it'll make the boat a little nose heavy. So moving that battery a little farther back down, I mean, ideally at the back of the boat, but just by moving it down a little bit farther in the midsection of the boat will improve performance. But if you don't have the right gauge of wiring to run that extra length, then you'll get more battery drain. We use, what do we got on that boat now? 6 gauge?
I think it's 6. If I'm not mistaken.
It's like a 1/2-inch rope.
Yeah, it's big.
Very heavy wiring.
Right. So you're fusing these trolling motors at a minimum of 40 amps. So 40 to 50 amp fuses. So in order to, if you look up any AWG and American wire gauge, you're going to find out the ratings of the wires versus the draw, the amperage, whatever. And number 6 or number 8 is usually a pretty good number, but 6 is good. 4 if you can do it. I mean, it's getting big now. but the bigger the wire, the more efficient any electrical will work. That's why when you're wiring up a house, you got to run 14. But if you're running in heating circuits, you run number 12, whatever, because it's the draw. It just is better. But when extension cords, you got a 100-foot extension cord, well, a number 22 wire ain't going to work with a damn compared to a number 12 wire, let's say. So the bigger the wire, smaller the number, is more efficient.
And then it becomes a balancing act, because if you're a performance nut, weight is everything in the boat, right? So the less weight you can carry, the better your performance. So now think of what Pete just said. In some cases, 4-gauge wiring would be ideal, because you're running it, say, the length of a 22-foot hull. You've got your battery at the back, your motor at the front, your trolling motor at the front, and that's a long stretch. So if you're using 4-gauge wire, that would be much more efficient in terms of getting energy from the battery to the trolling motor without wasting any. So your battery would last longer. The problem with that is that if you're using a run that long of a 4-gauge wire, you're probably adding another 25 pounds of weight to the boat. So
Sure.
you got to find a happy medium, just enough wire without adding too much weight to the hull and actually hindering your performance. So it's a constant battle. Pete will agree. We're constantly struggling with our performance, weight wise, right? Trying to get as much weight off the hull as we possibly can to get optimum performance. And by the way, optimum performance is not just about speed, although guilty. Speed is why I'm into it, but also for fuel efficiency. It's amazing, how 100 pounds in a boat will change the dynamics, the personality of your fuel curve completely. So those are things that you have to keep in mind.
And one more thing, when these, let's say a bass boat, even the Prince Crafts now, the fishing boats and everything, even aluminum boats are designed, they take in the weight of the batteries. So they sell that boat without batteries in it, but they know those batteries are going to go in it. Now, for the most part, they're going to be lead batteries, and they know if it's a 36-volt trolling motor, you got 3 lead batteries plus your cranker in there. So they use that weight in their calculations. So they make that boat maybe perform not as perfect as it can when it's empty. You add that extra 100 and something pounds in there, and that makes the boat perform perfectly. So they use that the weight of the batteries as part of their calculation. Just remember that.
We're getting some pretty interesting comments. Of course, we got the clown on. Jack Summers is on now, so anything could happen. Let's be aware of that. What else we got? Okay, so that's it. Hopefully, we've answered enough of those. We're going to get to next week. We'll answer all the questions that are on the sideboard now. But there were a couple of things we wanted to touch on today before we sign off. Pete, you wanted to do that pike thing that you helped our researchers with?
Our crack research team went into, right, Ange? Is that what you're trying to say? Yeah.
No, I'm not saying a word. You go ahead.
On early season pike. So that first week or two of the season, ice out. Right now, it's going to open in the Bay of Quinte if you get to fish it this weekend coming up. It's already been open on Zone 17, we'll say, in Ontario since the ice has been gone because there's no closed season. They've changed that around. So this is all about, when they say early season pike presentations, this is about stuff that we and I have used in the past to get numbers of fish and oftentimes big fish into the boat. So I wanted to go over that kind of, I think we'll do this every week. We'll take a web piece, maybe that whoever else wants to, if people want to write in and say, yeah, let's go over that. Give us an idea. Otherwise, we'll pick one and keep going with it. We're going to try and keep it to the seasonal too. So the pike being opening up right now soon. So we'll go with that one first. So that's what we're going to do here. We'll go over this presentation. So Stephen's going to hopefully put us through, scroll us down a little bit right there. And you see that, right? Hello, Angelo, are you there? He's not there. That little bait right there. We all know a MEPS spinner. I know, Ange, look, he's smiling, smirking already at that.
I'm going to let you get knee deep first.
That is probably my number one go-to in cold water when all else fails. So when all the big stuff that some guys are throwing, all the medium stuff that some guys are throwing, When you throw that right there, buddy, and it's not getting bit at all, I can guarantee you.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. Don't let me interrupt you. Right?
Good luck with that bait right there on ice out and anything in the negative post spawn period. Okay, that's what I'm saying. What this article is about. So MEPS number 3 is a great all around that everybody can throw, because remember, Ange, you and your Bobby Dazzler boat and your big 8-foot bait casting rod with the expensive $300 rod. You're not the guy that's throwing a bait with a 6.5-foot medium action spinning rod and reel. He can't throw that big stuff with that, right? These things are written for everybody. You know what I mean? So a guy can downgrade to that, but some people can't throw those big baits. So that's why we chose a MEPS number 3 or number 2.
All right, stop. I gotta tell you why. Hang on, I gotta tell you why I'm busting Pete's. You know what? Right now, because normally it's a collaboration when we do these when these top 5 things come out. It's a team effort. We collaborate. This particular one, I was probably away, and it just appeared, and so I was a little bit surprised at some of Pete's selections. And so I let him have it. That's all.
I'd like you to question me on all these, because I'll guarantee. Okay, that one there, you got to give me some negativity to the MEPS number 3. You go ahead, or an inline, we'll call it.
No. Listen, I'm not. The only thing I'm laughing at is the fact that I don't think I've ever seen you use one of those in that particular size, that particular color. I know you got it.
I have a box full of them, bud.
Okay.
That color, silver for sunshine.
Yes.
I got red and white, the old classic red and whites like that. I use this all the time. And the reason we did that, the reason I discovered it wasn't because of me. It was because Reno and I were way up in Saskatchewan one time, and we could not get bit on the big stuff ever. This was 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Sorry to interrupt you, but somebody asked about Reno. Maybe you just want to. They just asked how he's doing. What's he up to? And you just brought his name up, so fill him in.
So Reno and I, fishing in Saskatchewan, we couldn't get bit with anything. So the guides told us, try this MEPS number 3. We said, get out of here. Try the MEPS number 3. Boom, Reno got a 20-pound pike on a MEPS number 3. So I said, okay, my name's Cupid, not stupid. So I kept using that from up until right now. I still use it. So Reno is doing well. He had another issue, I think. Did he have a heart attack, Ange, or was it blockage?
Yeah, he had some kind of blockage recently, and he had another couple of stints put in, but he's doing great.
He's doing great after that. So
keeps on like the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps on ticking.
We call him the Reen Machine, because he is a machine, the Reen Machine. So, but anyway, that's where I learned that trick, that little spinner trick. Now it's not the only bait I'll use, obviously, out there. But when push comes to shove, that is a good one. And if you don't believe it, if you're like Ange, a little bit cynical maybe out there, you might want to just bring a little inline spinner with you and throw that when nothing else is biting, and you'll catch.
Just to go back to that for a moment, Pete, you and I have discussed this so many times. There were so many baits when we were growing up in the industry, so many of the old baits that work so well. I mean, the MEPS inline spinner is just one of them. The spoon, the Daredevil spoon, the crazy crawler for bass fishermen, the hula popper, all of these old baits that worked. I mean, they were money in the bank baits. And then all of a sudden, for some bizarre reason, we all stopped using them. They were working great, but we all stopped using them and went on to all of the new age plastic baits and hollow body baits and all this stuff. And we kind of forgot about those great traditional baits. And the MEPS spinner is one of them. You can't beat it for any situation. I defy anybody to not find a fishing situation that a MEPS inline spinner won't catch fish on.
Lori Winters says, my hubby loves throw a yellow number 3 blue fox, and the pike go nuts on it anytime. So, Blue Fox is another good bait company that makes a great spinner, right? They make the Vibrax. I think it's the Vibrax,
Vibrax.
Which is a very cool spinner too. So, next one is the suspending minnow bait. Now that's a husky jerk up there. Huskies work great, and in almost all situations. I think that's a number 12. 4 3/4 inches, 5 inches max. Again, we're looking for these lethargic cold water fish early in the year. So that, a suspending minnow bait small in natural colors, subtle colors, will kick the butt off any, especially post-spawn pike. You put those long pauses in there. The key to a small minnow bait like that, suspending minnow bait, is the leader that you choose. You have to have a leader. You're fishing pike. You can't run 10-pound fluorocarbon straight. So you want to go as thin a leader as you possibly can on something like that. And you don't really need swivels on your leaders. You just basically need a snap and then maybe a swivel on your line end like that. But go as light as you can on the leader. So like 12 or 14 or 18-pound test nylon or 7-strand or single strand, whatever. But go light as you can because you want to make sure that bait suspends properly when you're throwing that for early pike. And lots of slow jerks and pauses. Really slow and let it pause, 5 seconds sometimes. Caught some giants. Georgian Babe caught some giants doing that. So it's a great bait.
By the way, Pete, we just got busted. Reno says, "Don't let facts get in the way of a good story, boys." He's on.
He's there. That's awesome. Oh my God. I miss that guy. I want to fish with him again soon. Hey, that was so much fun.
The reason that I was laughing at Peter, him and I, we have a different philosophy when it comes to early season pike fishing. So he just said all those baits that he referred to, and there's more to come, but I'll just interject here for a moment. All those baits that he's talking about are great baits for lethargic fish. And we use those baits, he said, when we're looking for lethargic fish. Well, the truth of the matter is, we're never looking for lethargic fish. We'd prefer not to have to fish lethargic fish. We'd prefer to have to fish that are bang on and they're going to jump on our baits. And that's where I like to throw these babies, okay? But when you are faced with those tough conditions, the baits Pete's talking about will do. But we try and avoid those if we can. How's that, Pete?
Here, I'll show you. That's getting big.
Yes.
You like that? Wait. Yeah. I got better than that. Wait.
Yeah. Oh my God! Now you're talking.
Is that what you're talking about, buddy?
That's what I'm talking about. And here's why. Here's why those baits work early in the year, right after ice out. So what happens is the spawn is done. These fish have dropped back, but they're at probably the lowest point in their annual cycle in terms of health. They're beat up. They've exerted every last ounce of energy, and they're just sitting usually at the first drop from an incoming flow of water, because generally the bays adjacent to that is where those pike were spawning. The ice is now gone, and everything that was in that creek during that winter period, creek chub, suckers, which also were up there spawning at one point. Well, all the carcasses of any damaged fish come tumbling down off of that first drop at the mouth of that river or creek, and those big pike are just laying there. They don't want to move. They want a great big nasty looking chunk of meat coming down towards them, and they'll generally bite. And that's why I believe baits like this, big baits like Pete was just hooking up, if presented properly to those fish, is insane. Even using a live bait, big creek chubs on a quick strike rig that time of year is magic. So we would prefer not to have to use those little spinners and the little spoons, but unfortunately, a lot of times when we're out there and you're out there, you have to do what you got to do. So that's why I was laughing, Pete.
I remember that scarback shoot that I did, Inch?
Yeah.
That was post-spawn pike in the Algoma region. And great little lake, little fly-in lake. And those fish were so lethargic there. And I got a couple that were hammers. They were like 25-pounders probably. But I had to resort to, as Ange just said, live bait, believe it or not. They would not hit the big stuff. They would not even touch the small stuff. And they would barely touch the live chubs or whatever I was using. They were a good-sized bait. live bait under a slip float. I really had to work for those big fish. I mean, I literally had to have that dangling in front of them. And even if the minnow was alive and moving a little wee bit, I had to give the float a pull every now and then just to move that bait. And then finally it triggered a fish. That scarback, that one fish, and I think that's on our YouTube site too. That fish, it took me all day to catch that one fish. I knew where it was. I went back. He would not touch would not touch anything in the artificial department, and it wouldn't even touch these live minnows until finally I just did the right twitch in front of her nose and she ate it. So they can get, that's a 20 pound, 25 pound pike. That's an absolute eating machine on most days, but this was after the spawn, and that tells you how finicky they can be.
By the way, that was one of the best fishing programs episodes I've ever seen in my life, if I do say so. It was well produced.
It was fun. It was a cool show.
By the way, we got some trash talk going on here. I don't know whether you had a chance to look what's happening here. Somebody asked if Reno was ever going to come back on the show, and we didn't answer it. And then Reno says they can't handle the heat, Calvin. What the hell's that all about?
Viola number 2, we can handle anything you can throw at us, pal. Okay.
We spent 20 years with you in the field. We can handle anything.
I want to see you and Ange together on a show. That would be epic, buddy. I really think that would be like the ultimate right there. You bring back such good memories. You guys bickering back and forth with each other, competing with each other. I thought about you two fishing the other day. Reno will attest to this, and how different styles. Maybe I think it was yesterday I was driving, and I don't know why I got in my head about the old tournament days and how you guys worked well together, because there was such different styles of fishing. So Reno was this guy that would throw a spinner bait, well, throw anything that could go 100 miles an hour. That's what Reno would throw. He'd just throw out a spinner bait. He'd throw out anything that could be worked fast, and he would pick off all the fast fish. And anything that didn't want to bite that, Ange would throw a jig or a plastic worm, and he'd catch the rest of them. So you guys actually had a good little system going on. I don't even know if you realize what you were doing, but it was it shows your personalities. Reno's like always go, 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 go. You're kind of trying to think things out like that. So it was, I don't know what brought my mind to that, but it was just yesterday, I believe it. So.
Oh, we had some good times. Somebody wants to know, I'd love to see a couple of reunion episodes where Reno, Ange, Pete, and Reno get together, sitting around telling stories of episodes past, then showing the corresponding clips. That would be priceless.
That would be good. I'd like that.
Would be, absolutely.
For
cool.
sure.
Oh, we've got some. Believe me, we've got some good stories. There's no doubt about it.
See red and white. There's a daredevil. There's a lot of people that still go with the spoons. Were on our article as one of them. I don't know what order they were in that article, and I know you're going to agree with me on that a spoon is like without a doubt. I mean, this guy right here in a variety of sizes is killer on most pike lakes, most pike rivers, and most pike situations. This is a small daredevil, but they come in all sizes. Between this one and a 5 of diamonds, the yellow with the red diamonds, you pretty much can't go wrong with those for pike. The size would be the only thing that you could do. I mean, you retrieve. I think the key to a spoon is it's slow, right? It comes in boom, 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 like that. And it's just got a nice slow rhythm to it that you can keep off the bottom. And there's something triggering to that bait that I don't get it. I don't know why. And it's such a basic lure, but that is, I mean, the daredevil's been around for what, 30 years, Ange, at least? I'd say
30.
more.
Yeah, everybody. Eppinger started in the late 1800s.
Okay, so 100 years.
Yeah, 100 years.
So that itself, that red and white, has that been like?
Yeah, that's and you know, how many times have I said to you, you know, when we're using them, we say, what in the hell makes this thing work? Because it's not, yes, you can look at both of those spoons that Pete just talked about, the daredevil and the 5 of diamonds, right? There's the 5 of diamonds. And you say, okay, well, obviously the 5 of diamonds, it works because it's a gaudy looking thing, and it's got, you know, some red spots on it, and it's, you know, bright. And of course, well, try throwing something other than a 5 of diamonds in those lakes that Pete was mentioning, you know, especially the northern reaches of Canada. Try throwing an imitation 5 of diamonds. Try throwing an imitation daredevil spoon. and see how you make out. You don't.
Pretty weird, eh? It is pretty weird. I'll give
Well,
you I'll give you another tip, another color tip that we didn't add in there. Len Thompson. This came from Ray Colrus, Ray, our buddy in Alberta, and he put us onto these guys. Where is it? Right there. That color spoon right there.
Yeah.
And these are Len Thompsons, different sizes. Number 2, that's a number 0, number 2. He swears by that in Alberta for big pike, and we started using these last year too. And that color does work pretty good. Now it's got a glow to it. It's something totally different than the red and white, and it's totally different than the yellow and red. So if those aren't working, then maybe some kind of a trigger effect that the glow was working, or the green or something like that. So it's always, it's good to have a variety of colors and change around. So that's sort of a newer color that's out, and it seems to be working well too. So.
But they work, and that goes back to what I said earlier on about some of the old baits that we used to use and catch fish with that people don't use anymore. Those are 2 classic examples that Pete just mentioned. You also, and this is up for debate. Some people will tell you that just a split ring on those baits is the way to go. Some people will tell you you have to have a ball bearing swivel. Some people will tell you that cross lock is the way to go, and so the jury's out on any of those 3. But for sure, you have to have something on there. You can't just do a direct tie on those spoons. You have to have some sort of a ring or a snap or a swivel to make it really, really work well. That wobble that we keep talking
Here,
about.
Stephen, I got a shot of what Angel's talking about. If you order this, where's Stevie? Hello, Stephen. Hi, Steve.
He has a bed in his room.
So what Angel's talking about is if you were to tie direct to that, you're tying right on angled metal. It's 90 degrees angled metal. You will cut your line in an instant. So normally with pike fishing, you're fishing with a leader anyways, but you need at least a split ring. So a lot of these come without a split ring in them because they allow you to do a snap or put a leader or whatever you want to do like that. You can add a split ring if you want, but you cannot tie direct to that, obviously on a spoon, because it'll slice your line like crazy. So the other thing about a spoon, the action of it, it's normally to chew like that, but it does spin around. It does turn. So that's why you want to use a swivel. Like swivels are an absolute necessity on a spinner because that blade turns, but also the whole body of that turns. Spoons do the same thing, and it creates line twists. So that's why a lot of times on a leader, you run a leader with a swivel on your leader and a snap, and that'll stop line twist and allows the bait to really spin nice and true.
By the way, Reno says he's the better looking of the 2. That's interesting.
I've always thought that, but
he's never said that before.
I'm older but better looking, he says. God love him, eh? Couple more. Go ahead, Ans. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Finish off your list.
A couple more to finish off the list. The buzzbait, that Cavatron right there. This is right here. Cavatron buzzbait. A buzzbait is a great reaction lure early in the year, but only if the weather permits, only if the water temperatures come up about 2 or 3 degrees in that day. The afternoons, I never tie them on in the morning of a pike fish in the early cold water period, but come afternoon when the sun is going. And the reason we like to use buzzbaits, and Angela will attest to this one too, is the strike on a buzzbait is like no other from a pike. When they hit that thing, it is the most fun type of fishing you will ever get hit. So they drill it they come right from behind it and they just smash it. So a buzzbait is a good choice. Big bass buzzbaits are perfect for these early pike in warmer days, let's say. So
okay, so now that you're finished with all, are you finished?
I don't know. You want me
Are
to
you done? You have more?
You want me to be finished?
No. I'm just asking because now I'm going to take my 5 minutes worth and talk about using tubes for pike, but only when you're done.
I want to hear it right now.
So what comes to mind for me is a trip we made to a place called Pym Island out of Cochrane, Ontario. Do you remember?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And we started, and it was, I think ice had just gone out. We got incredibly perfect conditions for a change. No clouds, beautiful warm weather. The water started warming, the shallows were on fire, and there was pike everywhere. And we started throwing tubes, gigantic tubes that were designed primarily for musky fishermen. But this one in particular.
Made by Water Wolf Lures in Deserano. Mike DeBolt.
Yeah, a small little company that hand pours all this stuff in Deserano. And it is absolutely outstanding. When the pike are on, when they're active, like they were on that episode up at Pim Island, I don't think there is a better pike bait anywhere.
On that trip, you're absolutely right. That bait, we could not find a better performing bait than that big old tube. And that's the one you had the piece of wood in there too to make it float, right? Or to help it float a little bit.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Bending quality. It would have a really slow drop then. I mean, it was like, it was, and it did, but the conditions were right for it for sure, but it worked so well.
And it goes in keeping with what I said earlier on. Those fish are looking for those chunks of sucker and chub and decaying remnants of fish that were under the ice just a few days ago that are now tumbling down into their space. And this looks just like one of those things, man. And they just annihilated it. So tubes can be really good for pike as well.
And there's not a lot of people that throw that bait either, right? That's the thing about when you start getting into the more southerly areas of Canada, the more pressured areas, then you're trying to look for baits that are different than what everybody else is throwing, right? So a spoon is a very popular bait. A spinner is a very popular bait. These fish can get accustomed to those kind of baits. So a big giant tube like that, the advantage to that as well is there's not very many people throwing that kind of stuff, right? And that's a smaller. Mike makes bigger ones than that even. He makes some giants out there. It's like, oh my God, the stuff he's got on his website. You got to go check it out, Water Wolf. And it's, he's got some crazy, the Shadzillas. He's got some beautiful baits out there, I'll tell you that for sure. And they catch fish in the right situation for sure. And it's pike, and he's based it on pike and muskie, more muskie, but the pike will hit these things too. So what's Calvin? What's the best time to use a stinger hook?
Stinger hooks. Look at that. When is the best time? Anytime you can put a stinger hook on and it does not impede the action of the bait is a good time to have a stinger hook, as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, spinner baits, pretty much, I would say any situation that you throw in a spinner bait. Buzz baits. Pete showed you that big Cavitron buzz bait a few moments ago. Stinger hooks on the back of them wouldn't hurt you. In essence, a stinger hook is a little bit of insurance, especially on short striking fish that are missing your bait. A stinger hook is that difference maker in a lot of cases. But they were primarily designed originally when we first started using them. It was strictly a spinner bait thing. But now you can buy little wee tiny treble stinger hooks that you can actually put on jigs when you're jig fishing, whether you're using a grub or a tube or even live minnows. You can put a little tiny treble stinger on the back of your bait. So it's insurance, and it's also a great confidence builder. If you're unsure of your ability to set a hook on a fish and you're missing fish a lot, putting a stinger hook kind of helps with that confidence thing. And as I've said a million times, confidence equals success. Success equals confidence. Confidence back to success. So it's a never moving target with that.
So Calvin, on that, just to answer it quickly, kind of a rule of thumb again, we'll go to Angelo's. Both those instances he talked about, the spinner bait, we will start with the stinger hook on it if at all possible. Unless it's really weedy, then we might have to stay away from it. But smallmouth, always on a spinner bait. Largemouth, if you can put one on and work it properly, absolutely, without the weeds and all that. So we'll start with a trailer hook on a spinner bait. The opposite end, when he's talking about the jigs, if we're up north on walleye, and even on live bait sometimes, on a jig and minnow, a lot of times they're just grabbing the minnow and you're missing fish. So we always start without a stinger hook when we're fishing that situation. If you're missing fish, you add the stinger hook on and then you'll start picking up fish. So that's kind of a rule of thumb to do.
Yeah, Stephen, make sure you make a note of anything that we're answering from today's questions. Make sure that we don't cover it next week as well. That would not be very fair. Somebody wants to know, Mike Boyd wants to know, what's your preference for getting baits into deeper strike zones without the use of downriggers?
Wow. Nice.
Controlled depth fishing without using the ultimate control depth, unit, which is a downrigger.
One of my favorites of all time. This is for lake trout. I don't know about anything else. On small lake trout, and you get a little wee tinner boat that you're out there. The old three-way swivel rig. So I don't know if you've ever seen this. You know, we all know what a three-way swivel is. They got the 3 rings on the swivel. So you tie your main line to one of the rings on the swivel. You tie about a 3-foot lead going to your lure off of another part of the swivel. And on the third one, you have a dropper line with about 6, 8, 10 ounces of weight, believe it or not. So you're gonna need a heavy bait caster rod for that. But if you do that, you can literally, you'll have an almost vertical angle. You don't want a vertical angle, but you can be in 80 feet of water and you can literally thump that with your spool of your bait caster open, ready to drop. You can literally thump that 6 or 8 ounce weight off the bottom at about 1.5 miles, 1.75 miles an hour. And that the lure, then the sinker hits the bottom and the lure stays about 2 feet up off the bottom, whatever your lead is from the 3-way to your weight. It's better to draw this out, but hopefully I'm painting a picture of it like that. A great way, a very inexpensive way. 3-way swivel, a heavy 6, 8 ounce weight, something like that, maybe even bigger, and a lead going to your lure. And it's great for trolling deep, and it's cheap, to put it together.
By the way, the king of that presentation is on with us, and that's Big Brother Reno. Nobody can dig up lake trout in 90 feet of water like he can without using a downrigger. And 3-way setup, like Pete just mentioned, is one of his favorites.
Dipsies are good too, right?
I'm sorry?
Dipsies are good too, to an extent.
Yeah, they're okay.
They don't get really deep, but they get down there.
That's often overlooked because we think it's one-dimensional, and that is a variation of a Carolina rig. If you're back trolling in deep water, and you don't want to tie on a 3-way swivel with all that gear, a Carolina rig with enough weight to get you down is another good way to get down to those depths.
Yeah.
Obviously, the key there to any of those, if you're not using a downrigger, is speed. You've got to slow down that presentation to almost a crawl if you're moving in a trolling fashion.
Tim Spurgeon also asked, did you not use line snap weights recently? Yeah, in that Bay of Quinte episode, we do that all the time as well, especially when you don't have to get real deep, but you got to get a little bit deeper. A snap weight is basically a weight with a little snapper on it, and you just snap it on your line. You let out a certain amount of line, you snap it on your line, and it'll just bring it down that much deeper. You can go, normally it's like 3/4 of an ounce is a small one, 1 ounce, 1.5 ounces, 2 ounces, 3 ounces sometimes, but it's good for trolling. So you snap it on your line 50 feet, let's say, ahead of your lure, and then drop it out. And if your lure drops, it normally runs at 15 to 20, it's now going to run at 20 to 25 or deeper, depending on how long a line you get out and how heavy a weight you get on that. But so you snap the weight onto your line, let it out. When you bring in the fish in or your line in, obviously once you bring that, you're reeling it into the snap weight, just snap it off and then reel the rest of the in, either the lure or a fishing lure. So they're great too. It's good for controlled depth, play around with the weights, and it's a really good, it was designed by the walleye guys. I'm sure other people use it too, but the walleye guys really get really good with the snap weights.
And the ultimate way to get down to deep water fish, and I'm talking deep water fish, is a heavy drop shot outfit. We used one last year, shoot in the Bay of Fundy for stripers, and a pound and a half, 2 pounds.
Yeah, yeah, that was nuts. And
it was a drop shot.
It was a big deal for that. Like, they were using, like Ange and Nick were using gigantic spinning, like they were 8-foot spinning rods or something like that, but heavy duty 6,000 size reels or something like that with heavy braid. It's like, oh my God. And all they could do was just lob cast it out there because you couldn't even cast, right? It was so heavy. And the current there, the Bay of Fundy tide, I think it was running between 3 and 5 miles an hour or something silly like that. It was like, the anchor wouldn't hold. We had to modify our anchor to hold our boat in that stuff. So that's where that heavyweight came in handy. So very cool. That was pretty unique, that one.
That was fun. I got to get out doing that again for sure. So I think that's it for the questions today. We got a ton of questions for next week, so that's great. Don't be discouraged if we didn't get to yours today.
Are you next week or are we this week? Is it Friday or are we going next week?
Coming up Friday. So what's going to happen for those of you just joining us for the first time? We're going to do this twice a week. Tuesdays are going to be Q&As, and Friday we're going to try and get the episodes kind of themed. So we'll probably have a special guest on. Hey, why don't we see if Reno wants to come on?
Oh, I love that. That'd be the best.
So let's do that. We'll the Friday sessions are going to usually involve a guest, and but themed. So we might have a bass coming up for bass season opening. We might have a whole 2 or 3 hours of nothing but bass fishing. We might have a tournament episode. We might have we'll come up with guests. We're going to try and get people like Gord Pizer will be on the program for sure on several occasions, but we're going to bring special guests on, especially if they have something to say that is important to us as anglers for that particular period of time. We're going to try and keep it very topical and relevant and current, and so generally the guests will be there for a particular reason.
Outdoorsy gal says yes, Reno. Yes, she wants Reno.
Boy, we might have to look at resurrecting that.
I'm telling you, man, the guy's a legend. I'm telling you, he's awesome.
That old body of his might have to come out of retirement.
Yeah, well, this is good for him because he's going to stay at home, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You have to go. Exactly. Perfect.
Send him out.
Nice.
And then he says, "Look at him."
Okay, perfect. We're going to try and get Reno for this Friday. So
why don't we do that? Why don't we do that?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. We'll post on our social sites and we'll get Reno in. So anybody that wants to see Reno, obviously, just tune in. If you have questions for Reno, maybe during that piece, we'll get them. Or if you can get them ahead of time on our social sites, get them to us, and we can paste Reno with a bunch of questions and answers. So
our intention with this during the pandemic, or certainly during the lockdown period of the pandemic, our goal is to try and put these on every Tuesday and Friday. We are doing them. Each of us are in our own little isolation area. We're eventually in hopes that eventually we can bring it all into the studio and continue doing them on even a more frequent basis, but in the same room. And we're just trying to build this thing to see where we can take it. The important thing is that, much like you're doing today, the important thing is input. We need to know what we need to do. And so you cannot give us too much input. Don't feel like you're ever a burden by saying, "Hey, why don't you do this?" That's how we built the Fishing Canada show in the mid 80s. That's how we started. And that's how we've conducted ourselves for almost 40 years. And that's why you've made the Fishing Canada show what it is today. And so don't ever stop doing that. That's vital to us. It's extremely important. And please be cognizant to go to our social sites, Fishing Canada, or Fishing Canada Fan Club, Angelo's Facebook page, my Facebook page, Fishing Canada. It's at Fishing Canada Official for our Instagram, Pete Bowman Fishing at an Instagram. And keep in contact with us that way too, because we love talking to you and we'll get ideas from you there too, et cetera, et cetera. So please, and go to our website, of course, for any information you want, or through our website, you can get a hold of us. So we have lots of social stuff going on right now. We'd love to see more action on it. It'd be great. We'll be involved with it. So please keep us in mind for that. Things are going to change as we don't have most of the answers that you guys are asking, or questions that you're asking. We're asking ourselves, when are we going to get back to some sort of normality? When are we going to be able to put our boats in the water? When are we going to be able to do this and that? We're asking ourselves, when are we going to be able to shoot a Fishing Canada episode? This is the first year. It's the first year since we started the program that we're into April, almost May. We don't have any scheduled shoots, which is insanity. So it's kind of unnerving for us too. We don't know where or how or what it's going to look like down the road, but we can make this commitment to you. We're not going anywhere. We may have to deliver our messaging through different vehicles. We may have to change some of the items, but but we're certainly not planning on going away anytime soon. In order to do all these things, we need your support. We need your feedback. We need you to reach out to our advertisers. Keep in mind, and this is something really important, especially in the fishing industry, but in entertainment in general. There's a driving factor. I know we get annoyed with them. I'm a consumer just like you are. I like to consume my stuff without commercials and without a lot of interruptions. But every once in a while I have to give my head a shake, because none of that stuff would be possible without somebody paying for it. It costs money to do these things. So we're no different. Our sponsors, we've had some that have been with us for the whole ride. Princecraft, Mercury, they've been there from day one. And I guess what I'm trying to say, you need to support them too. You need to show them some love, because without their love, we don't have product. We don't have a show. We don't have this. We don't have radio. We don't have anything. So, in as much as we love having you, joining us doing these things, you need to show some love to the people who make all of this possible for us. And in whatever fashion that may be, maybe just a note every now and then to them. But definitely we need to make sure that those companies stay within the fishing industry and keep making it possible for all of us to do what we do.
Here, here. And remember, small is better than big. Okay, Angelo?
I remember that when you and I are sitting on the nose of FNC1. It's going to happen sooner or later, and I see you pulling out some great big gaudy looking chunk of I'll say, where's your little inline spinner, Pete?
I know when, I know how, and I know when. That's the key, my friend. That's
All
it.
Right. Right, so we'll catch up with you guys
Friday at noon. How about Friday?
God willing, Big Brother Reno will be joining us. If not, if he can't make it this Friday, we'll bring him on the following week.
Might be a little early for him, eh? It might be a little early in the day for Reno.
Yeah,
he's gone to bed for his nighttime by noon. He's usually up about 3 in the morning and goes to bed so early. That might be the opposite.
Oh, one of the things we want to start incorporating into this too, I forgot to mention, we want to make it lunch hour for a simple reason that we have viewers from both coasts that tune in. So we wanted to kind of make it midday so it's convenient for everybody. But the cool part about making it lunchtime, we want to have this program almost as a lunch time activity, and maybe we can have our lunches together. We've thought about that. Pete and I said, well, why don't we just actually have our lunches while we're talking?
I haven't even had my damn breakfast today, let alone lunch. So I need to eat real soon. I got a big machine, buddy. Come on.
Anyway, we need a name for this thing. So anybody has any ideas, send them in to us, and Stephen and Jordan and the boys will compile a list for us, and we'll have a look at them and pick something out that's
very quickly. George Cassidy asked if these live chats will be available through YouTube. Yes, absolutely. After this, you can get it on YouTube, George, for sure.
I was just reading an interesting one, but we'll do it.
I was going to say, you're not ready to go home yet, are you?
No, I gotta go. Gotta go. All right, Lester. It's been an absolute pleasure on behalf of the whole team, both Fishing Canada and Outdoor Journal radio team. Don't forget to tune in every Saturdays on the Fan 590 for those of you in the GTA. You can also listen live on odjradio.com or fishingcanada.com. But we do a live 2-hour radio program every Saturday morning from 8 to 10. And then, of course, the Fishing Canada show on Global Television Network, coast to coast to coast to coast, and everywhere else. We're also Lunch in Canada.
Nice. I like that.
We're also on WFN. We're on Sportsman's Channel. For those of you who can't pick up the global feed or miss the global feed, we're in a lot of places. Hard to get rid of us. And don't forget, if you haven't already entered the fishingcanada.com Mercury Princecraft giveaway, you got to get in there. I think our next draw is in a matter of, a few days for the 2.5 Merc. And then, of course, we have the boat motor trailer giveaway. It's also on the same fishingcanada.com. Separate contests. You have to enter both if you want a chance to win either or. Enter often every 24 hours. That's it. I think we're out of here. We're done.
Out of here, buddy.
Come on back on screen, Peter, and say goodbye.
Stephen doesn't like me. He keeps me off all the time. He put you on with maybe flip that, Stephen. Like 2 guys on there, maybe.
Yeah.
There you go. Look at you, Bobby. There, Prince Craft in there. Look at that. Eh? Woo! Woo. Flashing, styling, and profiling, limousine riding, jet plane flying. Son of a gun.
Wait a minute. You're taller than me again. What's up with that?
There you go.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, folks. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll talk to you on Friday. Take care.
Bye-bye.
A good angler is very versatile and also able to think on their feet and make decisions based on the conditions, right?
He got off because of you.
Of course. Of course.
No,
listen.
I had him on and I was doing my thing and then you told me to stop.
Just listen to the man.
Yes. And I
Learn from the man. Don't aggravate the man.
Set the hook. Yes, set the hook.
Yes! That's the biggest bass I've ever seen, nevertheless caught.